do have authority over the federal courts, as you know. We can eliminate an entire district court. We have power funding over the courts and all these other things. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and Congress is going to act. So stay tuned for that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson today making it clear that House Republicans are willing to use the power of Congress to punish judges who rule against President Trump. The threat comes as President Trump and his closest allies publicly attack U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who has blocked the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador. A group of House Republicans have filed articles of impeachment against Boasberg. Joining us now is the Hill's courts and legal reporter Zach Schonfeld with the latest surrounding this battle between the executive and judicial branches. Zach, Senate Democrats certainly would not vote to impeach Boasberg, but what type of actions are House Republicans looking to take against judges who rule against Trump?
Hey, Drew. Yeah, if Republicans in the House all do stick together, they could technically get through an impeachment. But as you mentioned there, it's probably dead on arrival in the Senate. But we are seeing, in addition to these articles of impeachment getting filed, we have begun to see Republicans take other steps too. So first of all, we have seen a new bill introduced by Representative Darrell Issa that would restrict the ability for these singular district judges to be able to issue these nationwide injunctions blocking whether it be an executive order or some other administration policy. These types of nationwide injunctions are nothing new to the Trump administration. They've really risen up in the last decade or so, but the Trump administration has really been complaining just about the sheer number of nationwide injunctions that judges have been issuing across the country. So this is now just the latest step from Republicans trying to crack down on that practice and trying to restrain the lower court's authority here.
And Judge Boasberg declined to lift his restraining order on those deportation flights. The case is now in front of an appeals court, where a judge said yesterday that Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemies Act than has happened here. When could we see a decision by the appeals court, and does that comment give insight into how you expect them to rule?
The appeals court could now rule at any time following that oral argument. We don't know exactly when, but that being said, this order from the lower judge is very temporary. So I think we're probably talking about a matter of days here and not the normal months-long schedule that we're used to seeing at the appeals court. But at the end of the day, it's up to these three judges. Now, you mentioned that comment there from Judge Millett, and I do think it certainly is a strong signal of how she thinks about this case, but she is only just one judge on this three-judge panel. She's an Obama appointee. Meanwhile, there's another judge on this panel who's a Trump appointee who we heard some skepticism of Boasberg's rulings, who seems like he could perhaps be in the other camp. And that would really then leave it up to the third judge on the panel, Judge Henderson, who was very quiet at this oral argument. So it really is an open question of how this court could go, and Judge Henderson might control that crucial final vote.
Judge Boasberg also looking into whether the Trump administration purposely ignored his order on March 15th, blocking that first deportation flight to El Salvador. What's next on that front, and what type of punishment could the Justice Department receive?
We did just hear from the judge now that the administration has formally invoked what's known as the state's secrets privilege. So the Trump administration here argues essentially that handing over this information about those flights that left on that Saturday night would be so detrimental to national security concerns that they don't even believe that they should have to hand it over even to the judge privately. So they have formally invoked that privilege, seeking to block the handover of this information. The judge has now set a response deadline for the plaintiffs to respond to this privilege assertion. That deadline is early next week. So we probably won't see Judge Boasberg issue his ruling until at least then. But he did at a recent hearing. He vowed that one way or another, he would get to the bottom of this.
Let's talk about another case that's made national headlines, the arrest of Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil. A U.S. District Court today held a hearing on whether Columbia University should be required to turn over information about Khalil's disciplinary actions to the House Education and Workforce Committee. Why are Republicans on that committee requesting this information, and what's Khalil's argument against the release?
This is the latest dimension of this pressure from Republicans in Washington on Columbia University over all of those pro-Palestinian demonstrations that we saw last year. They've certainly been feeling the heat from the executive branch and the Trump administration. But as you mentioned, this letter is from Congress, specifically Republicans on the House Education Committee. So this lawsuit, which was filed by both Khalil as well as other Columbia students, they argue that if Columbia submits to these demands, that it'll be violating their First Amendment rights because they argue that those pro-Palestine demonstrations were protected speech under the First Amendment. So at the core of this case, it's a free speech case.
Luigi Mangione, this man suspected of killing healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a New York City street in December, has requested a laptop while in jail. What's this request about, and is this something that's out of the ordinary?
I wouldn't say it's super out of the ordinary. We do see defendants sometimes make requests like this because this is a request to bring in the laptop so Mangione can get access to discovery. That is, evidence that prosecutors turn over to him so he can prepare his defense with his attorneys for trial. And the argument from his attorneys is that the discovery is just so voluminous here that it's almost impractical to print out these thousands and thousands of pages, and that really he should be allowed to have a laptop, only to see the discovery. It wouldn't allow him to contact the outside world or anything like that. But it does appear that we are headed for a battle. This filing from Mangione's attorney indicated that prosecutors here, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, is opposing this request. They have concerns about witness threats. Unclear, there's no evidence to suggest that Mangione himself was involved in these threats, but still the DA's office says that they don't want to give him a laptop. So the judge is going to have to make a ruling on this, and this is a battle that we expect to play out in the days to come.
Over in the Supreme Court, justices turned away casino mogul Steve Wynn's request for the court to consider overturning its 61-year precedent protecting journalists from libel lawsuits. This is seen as a win for free press advocates. What was Wynn's argument, and how does this play into President Trump's calls for reducing libel protections for the press?
Wynn had urged the Supreme Court to use his lawsuit against the AP as a vehicle to overturn that major precedent called New York Times versus Sullivan. It's the precedent that establishes that public figures, when they sue a journalist or a newspaper for defamation, they have to meet the high legal bar known as actual malice. So it really has protected many journalists in the decades since from different libel and defamation lawsuits. Now, the fact that the Supreme Court didn't take up this case isn't too much of a surprise. We've seen similar cases reach the high court in recent years, and the court similarly turned those away as well. But really what was honestly I found to be the most notable is that in some of those previous cases, we've seen conservative Justice Clarence Thomas come out and publicly dissent, calling on the court to overturn New York Times versus Sullivan. But when we got the order list about Steve Wynn's case being denied, Thomas did not publicly dissent. He remained silent. So a bit unclear as to where he stands right now.
The Trump administration filed an emergency application to the Supreme Court Monday asking the justices to block a lower court order forcing the government to rehire thousands of fired probationary federal workers. What justice is going to decide on this emergency appeal, and what type of legal precedent could it create?
By default, this case will go to Justice Elena Kagan. She is an appointee of former President Obama, and each of the 9 justices are assigned on the emergency docket. They, by default, handle appeals arising from certain regions of the country. So Kagan is assigned to California. This case comes out of San Francisco. That's why she has it. That being said, though, because of the fact that this is a request from the Trump administration, and this is a major case, we're talking about the reinstatement of more than 16,000 federal employees, you'd think that in a case like this, the full court will probably end up taking a vote on this. But although in theory, Kagan could act and dispose on this on her own.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Zach Schonfeld, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.
The FBI is launching a new task force dedicated to investigating attacks on Teslas, calling them domestic terrorism. It follows the latest incident in Austin, Texas, where a bomb squad discovered suspicious objects in a Tesla showroom. Officials say those devices were incendiary. No one was hurt, but vandalism of Tesla cars and dealers is on the rise in response to Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration. News Nation's Nancy Liu is following the latest and joins us now.
According to FBI Director Kash Patel, this new task force is dedicated to investigating all criminal activity targeting Tesla, and it comes ahead of a major protest action planned for this weekend. In the past month alone, there have been about 50 incidents of fiery violence and vandalism at dealerships, showrooms, and charging stations, what the Trump administration is calling domestic terrorism. So the new task force reportedly includes specialized agents from ATF, as well as intelligence specialists from the Counterterrorism Division. And they are said to be tracking a specific blog calling for anarchy. Just yesterday, incendiary devices were found at a dealership in Austin, Texas, not far from Tesla's headquarters. The bombs were removed without incident, and so far, no arrests. But the case is among those now being investigated by the new federal task force. The Global Day of Action, planned for this Saturday, will target 500 Tesla locations around the world. And organizers of Tesla Takedown continue to stress peaceful protest. But law enforcement is clearly gearing up and preparing for potential violence and criminal activity by Tesla terrorists. Back to you.
News Nation's Nancy Liu, thank you. America making progress in the war on drugs. In today's Political Minute, News Nation Washington Bureau Chief Mike Vaquera breaks down new data showing a drop in drug overdose deaths.
Some good news in the fight against illegal drugs. I'm Mike Vaquera, News Nation Washington Bureau Chief. The latest data released by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention shows a decline in drug overdose deaths in the United States, falling 25% over the 12 months ending in October of 2024. The number of deaths rose in previous years, hitting a high in 2022. But this new data continues a downward trend. Much of the drop appears to be driven, at least in part, by a decline in fentanyl deaths. Even as fatal overdoses drop, the Trump administration has made combating the drug crisis a top issue. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announcing a major drug bust this week. The U.S. Coast Guard seizing more than 45,000 pounds of cocaine and 50 pounds of marijuana in Florida. The drugs are valued at $517 million. I'm Mike Vaquera, and this is the News Nation Political Minute.
You can find more news and analysis from Mike and our colleagues 24/7 on News Nation. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.